Hello, adventurers, and welcome back to Rook's Tavern. Today we are going to be talking about the Warcraft expansion logos. I want to talk specifically about the War Within logo, the Midnight logo, and the Last Titan logo. But before we get to that, we gotta cover the history of the logos a little bit, because it's going to inform some of what I have to say about the new logos. So, we're going to start off with the original OG Vanilla WoW logo. Now, it's pretty basic, not a whole lot to say here. What's going to be important though is we have the World of Warcraft, Azeroth, right here. And we've got this ring of runes around the outside of it. This is a key visual element for all of the logos. So, this is what we're going to be focusing on a lot. Um, Not a whole lot to say about the Burning Crusade logo. It's literally just a palette swap of the original logo. Same pretty much goes for Wrath of the Lich King, though they did add some ice effects to the background plate. Otherwise, you can still see the it's easier to see if on Burning Crusade. Looks like probably Eastern Kingdom, so there's Gilneas in here probably. And that maintains pretty consistently. So Wrath of the Lich King added ice effects. That's really all they did. Cataclysm, they started doing some stuff with this background plate. They ate away at it, and they added cracks to the surface of the world, but you can still see the outline of the continent. They're still Eastern Kingdoms. Pandaria is the first time that they really changed the shape of that backplate at all. They point out these, and they paint the dragons over the top of the backplate. Otherwise, once again, pretty much the same. Now here's where it gets a little interesting. In Warlords of Draenor, they replace the globe with a new continent, obviously symbolizing the fact that we are on a different world. And the other interesting thing is they update this runic ring. We zoom in here and toggle back one, you can see these runes are pretty fuzzy and blurry and kind of hard to decipher. But this is one of the kind of key ones. It looks a bit like an A, and then there's this square with what looks like maybe a U inside of it. If we pop over to Warlords of Draenor, we'll actually find these ones down here, the A and the square with the U inside of it. So they've been rotated 90 degrees down, but they've also updated them to be a lot crisper. Other than that, it's largely just adding these bands the same way that they did with the dragons in Pandaria, and a few cracks in the background plate. Nothing too big. Legion is the first time they really changed that background plate. See, they've changed the spikes. This area up here has gotten updated. But they maintain the same basic shape language for the plate. Still have the point down here, though it looks a little different. They still maintain the spikes in this area, cradling the bottom of the sea. Still have the spikes on the side, still have the scrolls. Same basic shapes. Now, the runes are the new runes, but they've been rotated back up to the original north position, basically. Um, here's the A, here's the square with the U, and what's kind of interesting is it's easier to see here than on the World Trainer, but this is basically the center of the pattern, and everything on either side of that is just a mirror. So mirrored A's, mirrored sort of Y's, got sort of a 4 here. It's a little hard to see, but it's in the same position over here as well. This is a bit hard to see because they've inverted the colors effectively. Makes it a bit harder to read. So moving on from Legion, we move into Battle for Azeroth. Now here is the first time that they really push that border plate a whole lot. They're still keeping the same basic shapes, like I was saying. You can see some of the original plate underneath here and kind of in here. But they changed the patterning, they changed it to these studs instead of the repeating pattern. And all of this gets completely overpainted. And we're back to the original continent, still using the new runes. This is where it gets kind of interesting, and I'm not entirely sure why they did it, but here, for Shadowlands, they've reverted back to that original rune set. They're not using the new one. Because you've got the Z symbol sort of over here, which if I disable several of these layers, back to the original vanilla. Where'd it go? Oh, that's fine. There's the Z symbol. Doesn't exist here. For some reason, they go back to using the old ones for Shadowlands. Beyond that, Shadowlands completely changes the backplate. Still keeping the same shape language. Still have the spikes on the sides. Still have the teeth down here under the C. But otherwise, they've changed out all of the details and increased the resolution. What's interesting about the globe on this one is it's still Eastern Kingdoms, but they added the kind of shattered sky effect from Northrend at the bottom of the globe. And it's kind of exploding out into the Shadow Realms, Shadowlands. But we're still on Azeroth. The only time they've had anything else in that area is Warlords of Draenor. Now, Dragonflight changes everything. They completely change the backplate. Still keep kind of the general shape. They have an inverted V underneath the C. But otherwise, it's completely changed. They do away with the runes. The map is actually zoomed out. You can see a little bit more of almost all of the Eastern Kingdoms here instead of just Upper Gilneas, Lordaeron, etc. And here they changed the typeface, the font of the world. Warcraft stays the same as it's always been. But pay attention to the R. They changed the R, and the W gets a bit wider. Also, the of gets enlarged in the middle. And the L gets a bit pointier at the end. So, not entirely sure why they made that choice. Probably felt like mixing it up after all the years of keeping the same typeface. But that will actually carry forward into the War Within. This is the same type layout. Now, War Within, following Dragonflight, completely changes it again. This time doing away with the backplate and bringing this globe to the forefront, enlarging it significantly and making it much more prominent in the logo. This is likely because Azeroth is taking a much more prominent position in the story. Here, again, we are back to the new runes. And this is even more high res than they were in Draenor. So, what I find interesting about this is the ring is cracking and the planet is cracking. It could be just a visual nod to the cracking planet. They want to emphasize it more. But if we overlay the logo for Midnight, the cracks remain into Midnight. And they add more cracks and these pieces floating around the outside. So it's a progressive cracking and shattering of the ring around the planet, which I think is telling a bit of a story. Other thing that's interesting is in Midnight, the continents of Azeroth are gone. The only time that they've been gone before was in Warlords of Draenor when we left Azeroth. So the fact that they're missing leads me to believe that something significant is going to happen to Azeroth. And lastly, you have the Last Titan, where the ring is restored, and you have this new Titan ring around it, which we've seen in Vault of the Incarnates is a stasis chamber prison cell. You got the same golden glow, same ring with the same runes. So they're very obviously pointing to something being imprisoned. If you look closely inside of this stasis, we can see sort of star celestial patterns, which is often how the Titans represent before they fully manifest. We see that with Algol and the Observer. We see that with the Titans in Seat of the Pantheon as they're teleporting in. They first appear as celestial patterns, and then they manifest into corporeal bodies. So, now that I've covered all that, let's go into some of my speculation. Based on this logo, I think this outer ring is possibly some form of containment on Azeroth. And Azeroth is waking up, Azeroth is breaking out, and we see that in the shattering of the surface of the planet, and we see that in the shattering of this ring. Now, I did some looking. I couldn't find these symbols anywhere else. They don't match the symbols on the Titan artifacts throughout the game. So, as far as I know, they're unique. But if anybody has seen these in-game, please let me know. Midnight is interesting. I think that ring is fully shattered at this point. And you've got this swirling void portal almost going around the globe. Another thing of note is this is more or less an inverted color scheme of the War Within. Um, so I think possibly Azeroth awakens, breaks her bonds, and turns out to be void infused, which would lead us to Chris Messon's comment about a war between the void and the light. Because there's many forces we've encountered. Rel from alternate Draenor, the army of the light, who probably not take too kindly to an awakening Shadow Titan. It's not to say that Azeroth would be evil, as we've seen recently in the game. Valyria and others, Shadow is not necessarily evil. And we've also seen that the light is not necessarily good. We've seen that with the Naru trying to forcibly convert Illidan. We've seen that with Yrel being a zealotous crusader. We've seen that with, as far back as the Scarlet Crusade, being able to wield the light because the light responds to purity of purpose. As long as you have conviction, you can use the light. It doesn't have to be for a good purpose. So I think potentially Azeroth will awaken as a Void Titan, which could lead us into the last Titan, where Metzen says we will witness the return of the Titans. I think the awakening of Azeroth as a Void Titan would definitely be something that would bring them back. And I could foresee them trying or succeeding in re-imprisoning her in the stasis prison, because they would not want her free. So, might be a little bit out there. I might be completely off the mark. But I think there's definitely a story being told, especially by these 3 logos. Because nothing in a logo is by accident. Somebody had to spend a lot of time designing these and put a lot of thought into the layout of them and what elements to include. And so yeah, I think there's definitely something being told to us by these logos. So, if you found that interesting, hit subscribe, and I'll have another video coming out in a bit where I'm going to go a little deeper into my thoughts and theories on the expansions as a whole, and what I think might be coming, what I'd like to see. So yeah, hope to see you then.